Go, recording. All right. All right, well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from today. Welcome to today's Informative Friday session. We'll be discussing financial reporting with replication sets and Excel Power Pivot, which is being presented today by Arden Varney. My name is Doug Cottrell. I will be the moderator today. Please be aware that this session is being recorded. Quick logistical information before we get started. Please use the chat feature to ask any of your questions throughout the presentation, and we'll be sure to address them. There will be a Q&A session at the end where we can come off, where you can come off mute and ask questions, but please use the chat feature for questions during the presentation. I highly encourage you to take advantage of your time with our consultant today and ask questions and interact. And if I know Arden, he loves to interact. He loves to hear what you've got to say. All right, so a copy of the presentation and a link to the recording will be sent to all registrants. If you are not a registrant and would like a copy, please send an email to Molly Velasco. She will include you on the distribution. I'll put her email into the chat. All right, so hopefully you're a little familiar with Nordic ERP services. If not, we'll give you a brief background here of some of the services we offer. So if you were thinking about moving to cloud, or if you were going through an ERP selection process, Nordic's advisory service offers unbiased ERP review and selection services. We can help you identify the benefits of moving to cloud, manage the selection process, and measure the results. If you have already made the decision to move, and Nordic's prescriptive implementation process will ensure you follow a best practice approach to get the most out of your software for the least cost in the quickest amount of time. Organizations that have already made the move to cloud about 6 months after go live, and really every year thereafter, we recommend you have Nordic perform an optimization assessment to make sure you have realized the value of the implementation and you're taking advantage of the new features that are being added every other quarter. Nordic is there for you no matter where you are in your ERP journey. We encourage you to reach out to one of our solution experts via the website or shoot Molly an email and she can put you in touch with the right person. All right, so now we've covered some of those highlights. We'll give you a quick disclaimer. I got to figure out how to do this really fast, like the car commercials do.
We can just say read it at your own leisure.
Yeah. The material in this presentation is in reference to Infor Cloud Suite and is for informational purposes only. We just want to provide you with considerations as you make the best decision for your organization. Reliance on the information presented without consultation is at your own risk. We highly recommend you contact Nordic to discuss how solutions can be tailored specifically for your needs. All right, with that, I'll turn it over to today's presenter, Arden Varney, who is our Vice President of Financial Consulting Services for the ERP team. Arden, take it away.
All right. Hello, everybody.
Arden, sir, before you start, could you please click the mute all button so that your wonderful presentation is not,
Okay, better. Yeah, I heard the background. So yeah, if you need to, again, if you have questions, just come off mute, yell at me. I'm going to try to monitor the chat the best I can. But yeah, so I'm just going to go back to the disclaimer for a second. Yeah, anything I'm going to show you here today, you can't break it, so don't worry about it. Anything I show you today is going to be okay. So who am I? My name is Arden Varney. I'm VP of Service Delivery here at Nordic. I was a longtime Bales employee, so if you happen to know the old Bales name, or even way back Paradigm. But yeah, I've got an accounting and finance background. So I'm a CPA. I worked my way up through the finance route. I became an assistant controller with a company way back when. I worked for Coopers & Lybrand way back when. So yeah, my background is finance and accounting. I became a Lawson customer, the precursor to Infor, back in 1994, version 6, way back. I liked it so much that I actually went to work for Lawson from 96 to 99. And then I've been with Bales / Nordic in one way, shape, or form pretty much ever since then. And yes, I love Microsoft Excel. Some of you may be rolling your eyes and saying, oh, but I already take everything and I dump it into Excel and I don't want to do that. I'm going to talk about why this process is different. The other thing is that if you are here and focused on the financial reporting side of things, or that's what I'm focusing on this for this presentation. However, we've also done these same style of reports for supply chain, for other modules within the financial applications like accounts payable, fixed assets or asset management, projects. We've actually kind of dipped our toes into the payroll side of the house. So anything that you're going to see here, I know I'm going to be focusing on GL, which is Global Ledger, which is near and dear to my heart, but you can use this tool to access anything that is in an Infor table. And even outside of Infor, we've got a couple of requests for things where we want to kind of merge. If you're in healthcare, we're trying to merge some Infor data with some Epic statistical data that may or may not have been brought over into your finance system. All right, so with that, I'm going to go kind of fast. And again, if we have questions or if we need to contact me afterwards with more questions, I believe I saw Kyle on from Gillette. I did have a meeting with a Gillette representative here a couple of weeks ago to kind of get him started with some reporting on the supply chain side of the house using all the same tools we're going to talk about here today. All right. So FSM reporting options, Power Pivot, Power BI. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the reporting landscape in FSM as if you've been on or come out of the either upgraded from the old version of V9 or V10 or started brand new with Infor and Cloud Suite. The FSM landscape, for as far as reporting, it keeps changing and evolving, and that's the nature of being in the cloud, right? It's not like you wait 3, 4, 5 years to get an upgrade. The upgrades come fast and furious, and Infor, I will say, has done a pretty good job of adding to their reporting capabilities, modifying the existing tools, but it's still a little, confusing for some clients as to what tool should I use and when. So I'm going to walk you through a quick client case study, what we did with one of our customers. I'll talk real high level about what Power Pivot is, and I'm going to do a quick show and tell. Okay, if we have time here. So reporting landscape and FSM. I'm going to say it's still a quote unquote work in progress. If anybody from Infor is on the phone, that's fine. That's the way I feel. It's a work in process. It's still a little confusing. Okay, which tool do I use? There's multiple tools. There's great tools in Infor to be able to pull data out. But it's like, well, when do I use which one? And I think what happens with a lot of clients will default back to what they're most comfortable with, which a lot of times is they will pull in the data, throw it into Excel, and then do it from there. I'm like, okay, that's one way of doing it, but that's not, I think the recommended way of doing things. But again, for those of you that are either upgraded or you're net new into the FSM world, we're asking, and Infor is telling you, put more data into the global ledger or your general ledger, put more into it. And clients are like, great, I got a whole bunch of data in there. Now, which tool do I use to pull it out in the format that I want it in, right? Multiple tools for reporting, but clients still struggling to find the right tool for the job. So I will show you and walk through the different tools, and you probably know most of these. So what are my options? I got Application Studio. Now in the old days, for those of my upgraders out there, and I know that there's a couple of V10 people on this call, I had a tool called Report Writer, RW. And back in 1994, and even probably before that, that was cutting edge. It was when I implemented, I was so excited because I could create financial reports by myself. I didn't have to go to the IT department anymore. I could do it myself. However, Report Writer, when we moved up to FSM, basically went away. There's a whole bunch of reasons for that. Report Writer was basically written in COBOL. It was very old. It was good at reporting on kind of a flat structure, which was the old version of Lawson. All I can say is this. Again, I still like that tool. My 20-year-old daughter, who is an accounting major, I was working on a Report Writer report for somebody a couple of years ago. She walked behind me. She was at home and walked behind me and she said, "What's that tool you're using?" I said, "Report Writer." And she said, "What do you do with it?" I said, "Well, you can write financials with it." And I kind of showed her a little bit. And of course, her being, 20 years old and used to Excel and, newer reporting tools, she said, "That looks awful." I said, you are dead to me. I don't ever want to talk to you again because this is RW. This is the best tool ever created in the history of mankind. And she just rolled her eyes and walked away. And then I thought, this does look kind of old. This does look kind of, this is probably not what is going to wow a customer if in the year 2023, 2024, I pull up Report Writer and say, here's how you're going to write your reports. I'm sure they say, wow, I think we can probably do better than that. So within FSM, Infor developed a few new tools. Application Studio. Now, Infor does recommend this for all your financial reporting. There is a tool called Burst, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute. That's not good for financial reports. It's not good for rows and columns and all that other kind of stuff. It's good for analysis or analytics, not good for financial reports. So Infor recommends Application Studio for financial reports. But I'm going to keep going here. Infor had introduced many new templates to give a better starting point for some report types. Because again, Application Studio, it's daunting. We have a woman on staff, Tani Benvenuti, who is really, really good at these things. The rest of us on the finance side were like, ugh, this is really hard. It's a difficult tool to write reports with. You need a little bit more technical background, I would say. And a lot of our clients, the end users, are really struggling to write reports with this. And then again, much steeper learning curve than the old RW. Now, there are ad hoc reports out there. A lot of you probably already know things like list views, Infor Spreadsheet Designer. Love Infor Spreadsheet Designer. Infor's new Report Designer. So after Application Studio came out, I think Infor took notice and they're like, man, not a lot of people are really, jumping to use Application Studio. So they created this new Report Designer, which in some ways kind of mimics the old RW100. When I first saw it, I thought, I don't know if I really like this, but every few months, they're coming out with new features, new functionality. So it's getting better. It's a lot better. And we do have clients that use it reasonably heavy to write some of their, basic financial reports. And again, there's another big update coming in, when's the next big release? October. Burst. Again, Burst is out there. Some of you are Burst customers, but Infor's made it clear it's an analytics tool, great for analyzing data, but it is not a financial report writer tool. We agree. Okay, so I'm going to run you through a client case study. And again, after this, if you want to email us and have me take you through in more detail, I'm going to walk through what we did for this particular client earlier this year. So it's a trucking and logistics company. They upgraded from V10 to FSM, going live this past January. They heavily utilized Report Writer in the past. And then they would also basically take those reports, cut and paste them into report, or cut and paste them into Excel, and then use formulas to do consolidations. I'm sure a lot of you people either have this same situation going on or with your old pieces of software. And me as an accountant, as a CPA, that's not the way I want to do things. And I don't think your auditors are going to be very happy that when you cut and paste things into Excel and you're using a million X lookups and some ifs and everything else. And no, that's not the way we want to do this. Now, again, for them, the amount of time to develop App Studio reports, it would have been cost prohibitive. There was too many reports, too many RWs to kind of recreate. And they didn't really have a whole lot of people on staff to do it. We know that most of you out there today are very strapped for time, very strapped with your resources, and you just don't have time to do this. It's and again, it's a steep learning curve. So again, this was not doable for these guys. So for these guys, what did we do? Well, where's the data come from? Using Infor's replication sets, we grabbed the following business classes. I'm going to talk about what a replication set is here in a minute. But we basically grabbed 4 files. So the general ledger total. So if you're using, if you're a V10 customer now, that's the GL amounts file. We have a reporting chart account, which basically one of the beauties of FSM is that I can have as many roll-ups as I want, as many hierarchies as I want. So for this particular client, they did have 2 different sets of roll-ups. They had one for their kind of internal reporting and one for their external reporting. And Infor, FSM handles that really, really seamlessly. Finance Dimension 1 hierarchy. So think about your main departments, right? Okay. And again, you can pull additional hierarchies and dimensions as well. So what these guys did is they were very much focused on, well, what's happening East Coast, West Coast? And because they're a trucking company, which are my trucking divisions and which are my non-trucking divisions? Within that finance dimension one, we had two different hierarchies, one for the east-west, one for the trucking, non-trucking. And it's very easy to slice and dice and say, well, just give me the trucking group from the east, just give me the non-trucking group from the west. Very, very easy to do that kind of stuff. And that's where you should be going as far as using that, taking full advantage of what you've got in FSM. And then we have an accounting entity, which is for, to pull their individual companies. Now, given some of their uniqueness to their reporting calendar, we created a calendar file. Now, I probably could have done it straight out of Infor, but there were some vagaries around, some strangeness to it. I'm like, you know what? It'd just be easier if I put this in a static calendar file, which was a CSV file. And the nice thing, again, is about Power Pivot, about Microsoft Power BI. I can read from any kind of data source. Doesn't just have to be Infor. I can grab it from anywhere. Okay. And we developed an IPA to replicate their data every 20 minutes. I know that for a lot of you, I was a huge fan of dashboard gear. I have clients that are still using it today. One of the knocks was that, well, shoot, when that thing replicates, we got to wait overnight until we get an update. Infor Replication sets, because I'm only using these 4 files, it's extremely fast. When I say extremely fast, there's 400,000 or 500,000 rows in this general ledger total file. It takes under a minute to copy it and replicate it and get Infor to say, just give me a copy. So fast, in fact, that they replicate every 20 minutes. Now, that's not live or that's not real time, but it's pretty close. And for your finance people, if you're in the middle of a close and you post some journal entries and you need an update, that thing, like I said, replicates every 20 minutes. And then it just picks up the data, because it's in the cloud, it's on, Amazon server somewhere, and it just picks up the data and moves it into a local drive for them to report on, almost like a mini data warehouse. Okay. So what's a replication set? If you don't already know, it's a powerful way to take copy of Infor data. There's probably more to it. I've got some tech people on this call from my internal staff who are probably rolling their eyes right now. Don't worry about that. This is the way I understand it, and basically it's fine. This is the way it works. It's a powerful way to take a copy of Infor data. For you old V10ers out there, yeah, in the cloud, I can't just go to Amazon and start hitting their database whenever I want with SQL calls. Doesn't work that way. They're like, but Infor said, okay, since you can't come into the database directly, we will give you this thing called a replication set, where you can make a copy of the data, schedule it, make as many copies as you want. Probably just need to be careful as to which file you're looking at. Like if I went out and started to replicate the general ledger transaction file, that thing could be millions and millions and millions of rows. I happen to know that for this particular company, for their general ledger total files, I'm looking at a couple 100,000 rows. That's reasonable. Power Pivot, Power Query is very, very good at scooping up large data sets and consolidating them very, very quickly. Okay. So powerful way to take copy of Infor data. In FSM, unlike V10, you can't directly connect to the data. Okay, that's basically what I was just saying. However, using a replication set, you can take a copy of the business class data file table as often as you'd like. So here, and again, I know this is relatively small. You'll have a copy of the presentation. If you'd like to walk through with us, well, how do I set up a replication set? It's relatively easy. You pick, in this case, I know you can probably barely see it with my little green pointer. I'm grabbing the general ledger total file, and I can pick and choose which fields I want to come over. I can filter it down and say, well, only give me like the last 2 years. Don't give me like the last 10. I just want the last 2 years. Maybe you want an individual company, an individual entity. You can filter it down from there as well. But for this particular customer, we just grabbed everything for the GL totals file. We know, like I said, it's a couple 100,000 rows, and it updates and it pulls in about a minute. So, okay, Power Pivot. If you guys are going to, again, I don't want you to roll your eyes and think, oh, he's reporting in Excel. Oh, this is not good. It's awesome. And I'm going to tell you why. So what is it? And note, everything I'm going to be talking about here, you can also do very, very easy and replicate the same process in Power BI. So if you're Microsoft Shop and you're using Power BI, you can do that very easily here. I'm assuming you can do some of the same types of things with Burst, but I'm focused on Excel because everybody loves Excel. And if you don't love Excel, you should. But again, it can also be done in Power BI. So Power Pivot, if you guys know, I'm assuming that most of you are pretty good Excel users. If you know how to use a pivot table, okay, pivot tables are fantastic. Great way at summarizing data, great way of pulling data, doing analysis, love it. Power Pivot is basically a more powerful version of a pivot table. If you've got a Microsoft Office 365 subscription, I know that it's already built in. I think it's built into anything after 2020. But if you have Microsoft Office 365, it's just you basically just have to turn it on and get it, activated in your ribbon on Excel. Pivot tables are great, but Power Pivot has much more flexibility. I can easily pull related tables. You can do that in pivot tables. It's a little kludgy, but Power Pivot, if you think back to, for those of you, again, don't roll your eyes. If you think back to, Microsoft Access and the way you kind of have to drag your files and get them all linked together, it's much easier in Power Pivot. But that whole process is very easy. I can pull tons and tons of related tables for doing my slicing and dicing. Power Pivot can pull lots of data, way more than the 1 million row limit in Excel, up to 2 billion rows. And there's my nice little one animated GIF for the day. If you have a CSV file, let's say that your GL totals file, for whatever reason, was 3 million rows. When it gets replicated by Infor, it gets thrown into CSV files. So there's no really limit on a CSV file. And what happens is then you can use Power Pivot, Power Query to say, go grab as many of those CSV files as I want and consolidate them all into, and basically put your GL totals file back together again into one big file. Very, very easily done. And Power Pivot, Power Query, very good at doing that. So if you had more than 1 million rows and you tried to pull like an ISD, well, great. It's basically going to stop at about 1,024,000, 1,048,000 records, and then you're done. No. If you're pulling from a CSV file, grab as many as you want, unless you have 2 billion. If you have 2 billion rows in your GL totals file, you've done something horribly wrong, and you probably need to talk to us about coming out and fixing that. Power Pivot can pull from many, many, many different file formats. So ISD, anytime I'm building one of these reports for the first time, I use ISD. I'm like, okay, let me just grab some of the files and see if I can figure out what I'm doing and come up with a report that looks nice. ISD's native format is Excel, obviously. Replication set is primarily CSV, but Power Pivot can read anything, almost anything, XML, JSON, PDF, SQL, Azure, ODBC, etc. So you have many, many, many different ways of pulling in the data. It doesn't just have to be from Infor. Okay, so what's better? So when you run a report in Application Studio in Report Designer, you basically get a department or you might be able to get a few departments, but it's all going to be for the same period. If you use pivot tables, you may know that you can throw a slicer on top of that and use it to basically say, well, I just want January, I just want February, I just want company 1, I just want company 2, I just want this department, I just want that department. It's a great way to be able to have an interactive report, okay? Easy to slice, dice, expand, contract, rows, etc. I'm going to show that here in a minute. Easy to add calculated fields or measures to get exactly what you want. So in a pivot table, you're kind of stuck with just dragging and dropping your fields into a report or into the pivot table. But you can't necessarily, if you're trying to get information in column A versus column B versus column C, it's kind of hard to do that in a pivot table. With a measure, it's very easy to say, well, I want the current period in column 1, and I want last year current period in column 2, and I want a variance in column 3, and I want last year or this year to date in column 4, and I want last year to date in column 5. It's very easy to slice and dice. Oh, budgets. Think about budgets in your GL totals file. It's typically a different scenario number, and you can just filter out based on the scenario which budget you want to take a look at. So it's very easy to get specifically what you want. I don't want everyone to fall over, but to me, it's very similar to the data dictionary in Report Writer. For those of you that remember the old data dictionary, it was like, 40, 50 pages long, and it had things like CP/AMT for current period amount, LCP/AMT, last year current period amount. You can very, very easily build that with these measures in Power Pivot. Just takes a couple of minutes once you know what you're doing. Easy to pull, create calculations based on statistic values. So if you got stats in your GL, very easy to do those types of calculations. And this is something that we can train you to use and maintain. If you are, I'm already working with Bermuda Health. It's one of my clients. Yes, it's at Bermuda. I'm already in the process of getting ready to train them on how to use this. If you're pretty good with pivot tables already, if you can kind of understand the concept of a related database, you can do this. I like my consulting job. I like helping clients, but the goal is to be able to give you a tool that you guys can use. Okay.
Hey, Arden, I was
Yeah.
going to help you manage the chat, and there's a question for you.
That is great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Can you pull general ledger transaction details in replication sets, not just totals and summaries?
That's Godwin. Wait a minute. Bermuda, I think. Short answer, yes, absolutely. The only caveat is that's one of the files that's going to be gigantic. So you can absolutely pull transaction data. I do have a couple of samples where I pull transactional data. So short answer is yes. Longer answer is we just have to be careful, how much data we're pulling and how many, because that, like I said, that file can be many, many millions of rows very, very quickly. So yes, Godwin, yes, true. Okay. Okay, thank you, Candace. So other items of note. Now, again, these reports are not real time. That's been one of the biggest knocks with people going into the cloud. But in this particular case, I have a client that's replicating every 20 minutes. It's not real time, but I will argue that it's pseudo close, right? You make a general ledger posting, and 20 minutes later, you've got your updated data. Let's see. Now, again, you do need some technical expertise combined with functional resources to get the replication set process created. For the client that I'm going to show some reports here on in a minute, I don't know, we spent maybe a week's worth of consulting time total between the functional and the technical to get all these files moved to the right spot on the client's, in the client's network. So it's not complicated. We just need a little time to do that. And once you understand how to do it, again, this is something you guys can do. Need some technical expertise to get the files moved. Oh, this is what I just said, from Infor to a local drive where Excel/Power BI can read them. And formatting. Okay, so these reports, I've had some clients are like, well, yeah, but it's not formatted in the right version or the right way so that I can send this out to a board report. I'm going to argue that, yeah, okay, some of the formatting isn't perfect, but for purposes of analysis, for some of your hardcore accountants, for some of your managers who want to go in and report on this stuff, it's a great analytic tool. I have clients that spend, and I came from a company years ago that did this where we spent an insane amount of time on formatting. I'm like, okay, I just want to know if the number's right. Don't. I used to have an old boss, an old CFO, who used to tell me it's not done until it's pretty. I'm like, okay, I understand that philosophy, but again, this is more of an analytics tool. And again, I'll show you what that is in a minute here. And getting over the stigma that it's in Excel, but I can be very persuasive. Again, what I'm doing here is I'm not cutting and pasting it into Excel and then going in and doing a whole bunch of formulas. I'm writing a report. For those of you who have ever used the Kaufman Hall tools, if you've used Strata, if you've used Qlik, Q-L-I-K, if you've used Burst, if you've used Power BI, if you've used Tableau, Power BI, I would put in that category. I'm not, like I said, cutting and pasting and summing if and X lookups and everything else. I already have all that done. All that's done in the data model. Okay. So, and again, like I said, we'll be happy to show you some of these samples here. So, can I replicate a report writer report? So for those of you that are upgraders and you're like, oh, well, I've got this report. So for this particular customer, they had statistical information up top here. They had financial information down bottom. I kind of got everything grayed out here, hopefully. And again, you run a report writer. So they ran this for May. And if they want to run it for June, they got to come out and run it for June. And if they want to run it for July and look at what July is, rerun it for July. So keep processing over and over and over again. So what we did was we took this exact report and put it in Power Pivot. Now I've got my slicers up top. I've got my locations up top. I got my fiscal year, my alpha month, like which one am I looking at? And I've same thing. I got all my mileage accounts up here. These are all statistical values. I got all my numbers down here with a little plus sign so I can open and expand and contract those as I want. And if I redid this in Report Writer, if I said, okay, now I need to go run April, well, I got to go back into RW100. If I'm doing this in Application Studio, well, I got to go back into the App Studio, rerun, and look at April. I'm giving these guys an interactive report where they can just say, all right, I'm going to click on April. And within about 2 seconds, this whole thing updates. Oh, I just want to run June, click on June. I want to run a different department, I run a different department. Different entity, different company, run a different company. So that's the power of this. All of these columns down here are a measure. There's no VLOOKUP, there's no XLOOKUP, there's no SUMIF. It's just basically running out to the data and using what's called a DAX expression, DAX. It's like I said, it's basically like report writer. Okay. And again, like I said, if you guys have questions, I'll be happy to dig into this a little bit more. So here was their old consolidation. This is all done in Excel. They cut and paste this into Excel. And this yellow column was actually, some of the calculations were off. I'm like, oh, these don't, my report doesn't tie to your report. Well, because the calculations were just looking at the wrong column, which is a danger if you just cut and paste things in. So it can take hours to replicate and complete, because every time they run it, they would cut and paste all the data into Excel and then do VLOOKUPs to get everything that they wanted here. And again, it's just open for error, right? We did the exact same thing using Power Pivot in the exact same format, the exact same columns, and all they have to do is run it. If they need an update, they're going to have a new one every 20 minutes. And once it's updated, then they can just click and choose, all right, I want to look at August, I want to look at October, I want to look at November, and it's all interactive right here. Okay, so this was pulled from a replication set. Use Power Pivot to create the report. Balances and percentages are correct. Click on any fiscal year within the alpha month, and the data updates within seconds. Okay, I'm going to show you an example of that in 1 second. All right, so hang on 1 second. I'm going to come out of here, and I'm going to drag this over. Can everybody see this? So I've got my general hospital. Okay. And I've got a hospital, I've got, several clinics, etc. This is for 2024. I'm looking at Q4. I'm looking at my gross patient revenue. This is a healthcare account. I've got my deductions from revenue. I've got salaries, wages, etc. I can open up, I can drill down to the bottom. Now, I talked about formatting a little bit earlier. This is where my revenues are in green, my expenses are in black. I just suspend disbelief for a minute and just realize green is good. Black is money out the door. But again, for analysis purposes, to be able to just look at something really quick and see, where do I stand? Okay, so I've got 2024. Where do I stand Q3? Click, and everything updates. I just want to look at the hospital. Everything updates within a couple of seconds. Just a small hospital. Everything updates. Just the clinic. Boom. I just want to look at a specific department within a clinic. There's physical therapy just for that 1 quarter, for that period. I just want to look at July. Done. It's that fast. This is reading a database that's probably about 300,000 rows. And Power Pivot and Power BI takes all that data and compresses it. And it just works so much faster. For my older clients who remember GL95, I have an analysis tab that just goes in and I'm like, okay, I just want to look at the hospital. I just want to look at salaries and RN wages year over year. And I can say, okay, great. For this particular department, here's their wages year over year. Here's their overtime year over year. Here's their holiday year over year, on call, etc. And it's just updating, like I said, with just a couple of clicks here. Here's my small hospital RN year over year. I got a nice little chart on top of this. Again, it's a little rough. I was just putting this together mainly to just kind of show people how this worked. But again, so here's salaries and wages. And if I start clicking in, I can see which departments make that up. Because it's a pivot table, I could flip the departments up over the salaries and wages and have all the individual departments and all of their individual accounts that are associated with that. Very, very easy to create and fast, right? Just a quick revenue analysis year over year by department, etc. Here's just a quick dashboard: gross patient revenue year over year, gross margin year over year, revenue by account year over year, who's my top movers year over year. This is all using Excel. There is no whatchamacallit, no VBA, no Visual Basic, nothing. This is just using Power Pivot and just those DAX expressions to just say, okay, what means this year? What means last year? That's it. That's it. Statistics. Again, just this year over last year, these guys did a nice job of putting statistics in their system. So here I'm looking at for surgery and the echo department, RN wages year over year, department by department, year over year. Now, I do have a couple of samples on this. I'll probably run out of time on Microsoft Power BI. But Power BI, for those of you that know Power BI, it's very, very easy to create, the charts and the graphs, and you can do it in Excel, but it's probably a little bit easier to do and prettier in Power BI. But that's it. This is just pulling. If I look here, I'm going to click on my data, queries and connections. So see over here in the queries and connections, this again, test data for a client that we had. I'm pulling from the chart. I'm pulling from a calendar. I'm pulling from dimension 1, which is basically their locations, pulling from dimension 3, which is their departments, one entity. Okay, there's only one entity in there, just general hospital, and then their geo total. I grabbed just for the last 2 years for purposes of this demonstration, but 136,000 rows are sitting in this file. And again, all I have to do is I just click, 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 everything's updating fast, fast, fast. All my calculations are done. And again, I can just drill into anything that I want to drill into. So going back to Godwin's question, yes, I could have built this, or I could actually link the GL totals file to the underlying transactions in it. That's a heavier lift. I haven't done that here. I've practiced around with some small data sets, but technically you could do that. Anyway, just the art of the possible. I built some of these for accounts payable to see, okay, well, what's my spend by vendor? What's my spend year over year? What are my payments? Am I paying people too fast? Am I paying them too slow? It was amazing to me for one particular client. I went in and I'm like, why are you guys paying everything early? Like your invoice date is today and your payment date is tomorrow. And they're like, well, we just kind of always done it that way. I'm like, well, with interest rates where they are, I know they got cut a little bit yesterday. You should hang on to that money for a couple of days. Like, don't just pay everything out immediately. Don't do that anymore. Nice problem to have, to be able to just pay everybody immediately these days. But anyway, it doesn't just have to be finance data. It can be payroll. It can be HR data. It can be supply chain, other finance areas. It can be basically anything. So I'm just going to come back over to my presentation for a second. I'm going to come back from here. Oh, and of course, I'm going to go back to the wrong one. And I'm going to come down to the wrong one. Give me a minute. Truck and logistics, replication set, power pivot. Basically, I'm just giving you a full-blown replay of everything we just talked about. You're welcome. Did my show and tell. So I'm going to stop there and just see, like, again, I know I went through that pretty quickly, in the interest of time to make sure that we had a little bit of a time for questions. And again, if we're going to talk about coffee with consultants here in a minute, where if you want to get on the phone with me, like I said, I did get on the phone with, I think it was Jeff Jackson, I think from Gillette, Kyle, if I remember correctly. And yeah, we just went through real quick and kind of, the nice thing is that if you've got, some technical people that kind of understand the reporting piece a little bit, this is not hard for you guys to set up. I think I've also got Benjamin on the phone. I know he's a V10 client. Everything I built here was for FSM. We could technically rebuild the same thing for something like, for V10. I'll stop there and just see if anybody's got any questions. I think I muted everybody, so I don't know, Michelle, if I have to take people off or.
Yeah, I can unmute them. Okay,
and just see if there's any questions. And again, we'll talk about coffee with consultants. Like I said, if you wanted some time to chat or meet and go through, exactly how we're doing this, I'd be happy to take you through a little bit more of a deeper dive. I know that was pretty quick, so.
Yeah, so if anybody would like, they can themselves at this point.
I just got a quick question.
Sure.
When you're pulling from rep set, you say you could do it for AP, payroll, procurement, and material on all those departments.
Yes.
Do you pull it as one file, or do you have several rep sets for them?
Okay. So you know what? Hang on. While I've got my screen sharing on here, hang on 1 minute. I'm going to show you what a rep set actually kind of looks like. If you just give me 1 second here. So if I go to, let me just go to my clients and show you what this looks like. So for this particular client, this was some of my practice files, but like here, here's the GL totals file. Can you see this? So when a rep set comes through, see how they're all about, you know, just under a mega piece. There's about 50, 49, 50 files. And what happens is when this replicates, you can give it some parameters. Well, how big do you want the file to be? This was our first pass at it. So I'm like, just give it to me as is. And like I said, this was about 400,000 rows and it came in as 50 files. I'm like, uh-oh, what do I do with this? I got 50 of these things. How am I going to query this? Well, Power Query, when you pull the Power Query is the tool that's used that kind of sits between Excel and your data, or Power BI and your data. And it's very easy to say, take whatever you see in this folder and consolidate it into one file. And that's why when you saw in that other file, I think it's at 136,000 rows, the replication set comes out here, dumps all these files in, and then Power Pivot, Power Query goes out and says, yep, just take all this and treat it as one. And this is the one that's being replicated every 20 minutes. If you can look, you can see the date that it started was, or it started at 9:50 and it finished at 9:50. So it just took all of those individual files and dumped them in. So does that actually answer your question, or did I go someplace off into a tangent?
Yeah, I think so. So basically, you could combine all those departments in one rep set, right?
Yes, I could do. Yeah, absolutely. Do it all as one rep set. And again, it's when you say all those departments, that's where also within the rep set you can tell it. Well, I only want data between these two dates. I only want these departments. I only want these entities. I only want this group of employees. I only want these types of items from my item master. Yeah, you can either grab it all, which is typically what I start with, so I can see what I'm working with, or you can be very, very specific and tie it down. So.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Hi there. I thought I heard you say that you started with an ISD and then translate that into a rep set. Is that standard process, and how does that normally work for you?
That's a great question. So what I did originally for these guys was I created it because I'm like, you know what? I'm not even going to play with a rep set here. I'm going to pull it all into ISD. Hang on 1 second. I'm going to bring back my file here for a second. But yeah, that's kind of the way that I build it, because I just kind of want to see where the data is, how it's working, how it's loaded. See, I'm in queries and connections right here. When I right click on any one of these and edit, this is going to bring up my Power Query editor. And this is how, basically, this is an ETL tool. So extract, transform, load. If you guys know what that means, you guys are already super sophisticated and this will be very easy for you. See right here where it says data source settings? What I did the first time was I basically, this is actually pulling from an ISD. So this is pulling from an Excel sheet that's got 4 tabs on it, or 4 or 5 tabs for the chart, the calendar, etc. And then once I was ready to say, you know what, these files are the exact same format, because I pulled these from the CSV file, all I did was I basically did change source. I sent this file over to the client and just had them point to wherever those ISD files or those replication sets are sitting. It's maybe slightly more complicated than that, but once I sent them the file that I had built in ISD, for me to send it over so that they could tie it into their replication sets, it took us a half an hour. It was not hard, but I always start with ISD because I'm like, I can kind of control how much data I'm pulling and kind of see if what I'm doing looks right. Because a lot of times I'll pull a particular file and I'll look at it and I'm like, that's not even close to what I want. I'll start over again. But yeah, pretty easy to build it in ISD and then transfer it to a replication set. Yep. If that makes sense.
Yeah, from a Power Query standpoint, I'm pretty familiar with that stuff. It's the Infor side of it where you go to say, I'm going to take this ISD and now make it into a replication set. That's the piece that is still
exactly. And that piece isn't too bad. Like I said, if we walked you through the the process, because the first time I looked at it, I'm like, what am I looking at here? And once you kind of understand how it works, the nice thing about that replication set is it gives you basically all the exact same criteria that ISD has. So if you want to filter something, if you want to pull in a related field, I'm like, this is great, because I thought, oh shoot, when I pull in the GL totals, I'm gonna have to pull in like 15 different files to link to it so I have all the data I want. No, that replication set allowed you to pull. It looked very, very similar to ISD. It was slightly different layout, but I'm like, oh, wait a minute, this works exactly the same way that ISD works. So that made it even easier. So if that makes sense.
Yep. Thank you. One last thing. I'm hogging time. I apologize.
No, it's fine.
The file transfer process, is there a standard offering that does that? Is it native to Infor? Is third party? How are you pulling off moving these files into a local folder?
For that particular piece, let's see. I think I got Matt on the phone. I got some of my tech people. What we did was we created basically an IPA that automatically just picked up those files, and using an FTP protocol move them over to their drive. I don't remember there being anything proprietary. I don't remember there being anything unusual. It was all very, very standard. But again, I can have you talk to our tech team that actually helped us build that, because I just said, me being the functional guy, said, this is what I want, and this is where I want it to go. And they're like, yeah, that's not hard. And then they built it. So it's not, I know I'm kind of joking around and making it sound, easy. It was very easy. It's all typical FTP, style tools. And all we did was we just built an IPA around it to say, just move this every 20 minutes. So, but pretty straightforward and pretty standard. I don't think you're going to need anything other than what you probably have today as tools to move it.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Hey, Arden. This is Dan Miller. So on the replication set, what position is that in terms of security, in terms of the people that would have access to develop those?
Shoot, I forget which role it's under. Maybe one of my people can help me. I know that there is security around it. Maybe not just everybody can go and build a replication set.
Right.
Everyone on the Nordic side is going to laugh at me, because I typically go under the system admin role, or the all access role. I'm like, oh, just type in replication set. Oh, there it is. Okay, now I know where it is. But me being a super user to a customer, they're just like, okay, fine, we'll give you access to everything. I forget specifically where it is, but I think it's underneath tech tools somewhere. But I can get you that answer. I don't know off the top of my head, but yes, there is security around it. Not everyone at Magellan could just go in and start running these things whenever they wanted to. Oh, no. And you don't want that. So.
Right. Yeah. Just trying to get an idea of how that, if we wanted to look at that, directionally, how would we put that together with, what people would be required to work on that? So
exactly.
Okay,
Yep.
Great. Good. Thank you.
Sure. Come back over to my presentation. So again, if you have any questions, or if you want, again, some more details, I'd be happy to sit down. We're like I said, we're building some stuff with Bermuda, Godwin. I think you know that, and it's a nice tool, because for your accountants. Okay, I'm going to go back to my finance people. Your accountants kind of get it. They're like, oh, okay, this kind of makes sense, and I understand how to do this and how to pull these, these pieces together. But you can do this anywhere: finance, HR, payroll, supply chain. If you're struggling with, I really just want a report that does this, or I'm taking information and I'm cutting and pasting and dumping it, which again, I'm a big Excel user, love to do it. But if you want that piece kind of automated, this is a great way to do it. Not a huge cost to do it with tools that you probably already own. So, and let's see, just real quick here. So I know that September 27th, so next week we got coming up. All right, I don't know, Doug, did you want to cover this? Or sorry.
Sure. Yeah. So just to follow up on the slide before here, we've got the coffee with a consultant. So if you're interested in having that follow-up conversation, you can just reach out to us either at Molly's email on there, or you can go to Nordic Global/contact and make a request for that 30-minute meeting. There's no cost for that. Then coming up, our September series of Infor webinars continues. We'll be doing September 27th, a presentation on how to realize the full potential of your ERP system. So please go online and register to join us for that. Let's see, again, if you are trying to figure out how to do that, you can always just send an email to Molly. We can do this the manual way, or you can go to our site. After our September series, we will have our next quarterly sessions that'll be in February of 2025. So look for the registration information for those next January. And finally, hopefully we'll see many of you at Infor Velocity in October. So we'll be there, and please look for our team and introduce yourself. We'd love to get a chance to talk to you in person.
Just look for this handsome guy right here. That's all you need to know.
With the flowing locks.
It's all gray at this point. That picture's like 6 years old. Look for the guy with all the white hair now. And that's it.
All right, we'll wrap it up, and we look forward to hopefully seeing a bunch of you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Happy
you.
Happy
you.
Friday. Thanks.